The third epistle of John is very different from the first two. As we've noticed in previous videos, 2nd John, which is like 3rd John, a very short letter, but 2nd John is very similar in tone and in content and in style to 1st John. It's just a much shorter version. It's a condensed version of 1st John. Though 3rd John is also short, it is not like 1st or 2nd John. It has a totally different kind of attitude behind it. There's a different kind of emotion. The early parts where John spends most of his time just praising this one Christian. When you read the second half in light of the first, it's almost like he's writing all those praiseworthy things. Not that they're not true, but he goes overboard. He just says so much about it to offer a contrast with this one. And it's almost like all of 3rd John is written simply to specifically rebuke this one person in the second half of the letter and offer a warning for all of us to beware of people like this person that he rebukes. If you were to kind of find a theme to this short, it's a 14-verse book, but if you were to find a theme to it, it would be that John is reminding us of the hierarchy of the Church of Christ, with Christ himself as the head of the church, with the apostles under Christ as the ambassadors of the church, ambassadors of Christ and the first leaders of the church, and the word which they wrote to guide us. And then under them are the bishops and the pastors and the elders who oversee the individual congregations, and then under them all the brethren. And how there is this one bishop, this one elder who has tried to have preeminence over the apostles and set himself up even as a lawmaker like Christ. And so even though this is a short letter, it's a very personal letter, it is a very needed book, and we should be thankful the Holy Spirit included it in the inspired canon so that we can read it later and be aware that some of the problems we have today with overzealous leaders who take too much power on themselves was a problem being found back then, that they were dealing with it then as well. And John's warnings, John's exhortations, and John's advice are all important for us to read today, 2,000 years later. It begins with the same way that the second letter begins of John, with him saying the elder. But again, that's not just that I'm an older person, though John was very old at this point. It's more that he was describing himself as a bishop, as a pastor, a shepherd, an elder. There's a lot of different terms that refer to the same office of Christian. The elder, he says, unto the well-beloved Gaius. Not just a Gaius, but he says big time, he's well-beloved. This is a faithful Christian he's writing to, Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Very similar opening to the previous letter with the elect lady. Verse 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. He wants him to prosper. The word prosper means succeed. But it's implied that perhaps this Gaius individual is not in good health. And that's why he says it the way he does. Prosper and be in health as you prosper in your soul. Spiritually, you're strong, but perhaps physically he was not strong. And John's offering in his opening of the letter just some well wishes and his prayers that he gets his strength back. Verse 3, he says, For I rejoiced greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even that you walk in the truth. He's heard word about Gaius, which seems to be, as we go through the next few verses, what necessitates his writing, what motivates John to write. He's heard this great report of Gaius, and also this other thing he wants to write about in the second half. But to hear how good Gaius is doing and how well this Christian is maintaining his faith motivates him to write an encouraging letter. He words it here as he walks in the truth, and he does it so openly that other brethren know about it. Verse 4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. My children, not literally, this is not John's son, but this is a younger Christian, and John loves to use the phrase little children, my little children, as a term of endearment, because he was so much older. He was also an elder in the church, but he was also someone who had this nurturing sense about him. He didn't start out that way, we know from reading the gospel accounts, but he became the great gospel of love, the great apostle of love. And so that comes through here. Verse 5, Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do to the brethren and to strangers. And that's the report that he's been given, that this Gaius is someone very charitable, very hospitable. Charitable, he's good to everybody. Hospitable, he's good in particular to strangers, to those who he does not know, to those who that he has no relationship with, who are just strangers to him, yet he loves them like they're not strangers to him. And that is the cause of John's praising him. Verse 6, which have borne witness, the witnesses have come back and given messages to him, to John about Gaius. They've borne witness of his charity before the church, whom if you bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, you shall do well. So missionaries have come in, and Gaius has received these missionaries. He has supported these missionaries. He has helped these missionaries. And now they have gone back and they have met John, and they have said, there is this brother named Gaius who has been such a help to us. He did not know us, but he wanted to help us, and he was faithful to God in his sacrifice for us, his hospitality to us. Now again, in and of itself, this is just praise to a praiseworthy Christian. But the second portion of the letter is so obviously a contrast that it's clear that John is just, well, not just, but is also using Gaius' praise to show us, the future readers, what we should be versus what we should not be. So he reminds him in verse 6 that he was helping these brethren in their journey along the way. And how of these missionaries, John says, because for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. They preached to these non-Christians, they converted these non-Christians, these Gentiles, but they would not accept the money from their converts, because they were just starting out perhaps, or because they didn't feel right taking money from those they had just saved. Whatever their motivation was, their scruple was, whatever, they wouldn't take money from these new brethren, so they accepted help from Gaius and from established Christians, longtime Christians. Verse 8, we therefore ought to receive such, that we might be fellow helpers to the truth. John offers kind of a general statement. We should be helpful to missionaries. Now Gaius is, so why is he saying that? To contrast with the next verse. But here in verse 8 he says, we should help missionaries. We should support missionaries. And if we do help them, though we stay still and they go on, and they go all over and we're staying in one place, though we've helped them, that means we can become fellow laborers with them. It's the same as what he said in the second epistle that he wrote, when he says if we support false teachers, then we become partakers of their evil. Even though we don't go doing the preaching, they're doing the preaching, but if we support them, then we're right along with them. Here's the positive side of that. If you support a faithful preacher, then you are a fellow laborer with them. Your financial support, your emotional support, your prayerful support, all of it gives you a piece of the pie of joy. As the joy a preacher feels when he converts a soul, you get to feel some of that joy as well, because you had a hand in that. You had a small part to play in that. Now that's a good thing. Now verse 9 is the opposite side of that. He says, I wrote to the church, and I assume the church is the congregation where Gaius and this other person he's about to mention labor. I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, receives us not. Diotrephes, the word means to pamper Zeus. Zeus. And then the other part of that word is to pamper, to nurture, to baby, to spoil. So this guy's name literally means to spoil the god, Zeus. Now, how fitting is that? Because that's who this guy is. This is a person, John describes him as someone who loves to have preeminence. I want to be above everyone else. And I wrote to the church, but this Diotrephes person would not receive us. We tried to reach out to you, to your congregation, but this one individual, in stark contrast to Gaius, this Diotrephes, he would not help. He wanted to push everyone away, keep himself at the top of the pyramid. Verse 10. Here is the meatiest verse of the text. Wherefore, if I come, John says, I will remember his deeds, which he does, prating against us with malicious words, not content therewith, neither does he receive the brethren, and forbids them that would, and cast them out of the church. There are a multitude of expressions that John uses to describe the reasons why this Diotrephes is bad news. Notice, first of all, he says he's prating. That word means he turns little disagreements into big feuds that don't need to be turned into that. Then he says he offers malicious words, hateful speech, not a loving person. He is a person not content. He's never satisfied. Something is always wrong. There's always something to complain about. That kind of attitude. He says, neither does he also receive the brethren. He is not hospitable as Gaius is, and as we're all supposed to be. Which, that's why he phrases it the way he does in verse 8, seemingly saying what Gaius already knows. He words it there to show the contrast, because we're all supposed to be like Gaius, and none of us should be like this Diotrephes. So he does not receive himself, or he does not receive the brethren, and he forbids them that would, like Gaius, who would receive brethren. This Diotrephes refuses to let you. He orders you not to. So he's making laws where the apostles have not and where Christ has not. So he's trying to put himself above the hierarchy of the church, and even cast them out of the church. You are no longer welcome to worship with us here if you receive these missionaries, if you help these people. That's Diotrephes. And so he has put himself in the place of the apostles, he's put himself in the place of Christ, and he is a maker and shaker of the law of God by his own esteem. And that is not how it should be. And so that's a bad elder. To him, or about him, John says, verse 11, Beloved, follow not that which is evil. Do not follow that kind of leader. Do not submit yourself to that kind of authority figure. They may wear a title, they may meet a few qualifications, but clearly he doesn't meet all of them, yet he's found himself in a position of authority. As John says, do not follow that kind of leadership. You follow Christian leadership. You follow faithful Christian leadership. And that is not what Diotrephes offers. So follow not that which is evil, but follow that which is good. He that does good is of God, but he that does evil has not seen God. And that's what he says of Diotrephes, by implication. He does not follow God. He's never seen God. He doesn't love God. He doesn't know God. So you don't want to follow him. You would be the blind leading the blind in that case. He has no idea who God is, so don't follow him. Verse 12. Look at another contrast. Demetrius, not Diotrephes, but Demetrius has good report of all men. Word has come about him that is favorable, not like Diotrephes. And of the truth itself, good report of him and of the truth. He walks with the truth. Yea, we also bear record, and we know that our record is true. John says, we know our record is true, and we know Demetrius is a faithful person, walking in the truth, unlike Diotrephes. Verse 13, this is now the conclusion of the letter, last two verses. I had many things to write, but I will not with ink and pen write unto you. Almost the same thing he said to the lady in the second letter. I want to meet you, I don't want to write with paper, I want to see you face to face, which is what he says in verse 14. I trust I shall shortly see you, and then we shall speak face to face. Peace be to you, all your friends salute you, greet your friends by name. We'll get to the very last part of that verse in a second, but notice the beginning of verse 14, how it ties in with verse 13. I have a lot more things to say, but I don't want to do it with paper and pen, so I'll do it face to face. Now, when he said that to the elect lady in 2 John, there was kind of this warmness to it. Oh, I love you, I miss you, my sister, I want to see you face to face. Here, there's this edge to it, because he's just been rebuking this Diotrephes, and he says in verse 10, if I go there, then I will correct that. I will remember his bad attitude. And so his saying, I'll see you face to face, it's a tone of encouragement to this faithful brother. It's also a bit of a warning to this supposedly preeminent Diotrephes. And then, of course, as I say, he ends with the customary closing salutation, peace be to you. Our friends salute you, those with us salute you. And then he tells him, greet your friends by name, your brethren. Know their name, have a relationship with them. They are your family. And that's how it ends. Beautiful opening, tense middle, and then a beautiful ending. But as I say at the beginning, this is an important book, and I'm glad we have it. Though it's so short, it's very brief. It's one of the least studied books. These latter books here in the New Testament aren't studied very often, but they should be. And this one in particular reminds us that there is a hierarchy to the Church of Christ, with Christ at the top, with the apostles, the Word of God under him, the bishops and the elders who faithfully carry out leadership to help Christians, and then all Christians under them. But when you have an elder that sticks out to the side and tries to run the show, well, that goes against the hierarchy as God established. That's 3 John. We'll pick up with the book of Jude. Different author, same time period roughly that it was written, but totally different content and text and author. But we'll study the amazing book of Jude next time. Until then, thank you very much.